Even when you look at the concept of economics, right? When you look at it deeply, the economics is the study of scarcity. What scarcity does the global South have, specifically Africa, right?
For example, I think JP
Yeah.
Morgan still has a private blockchain. It's not a threat to current systems. It's a way for everybody to make, every single entity involved, I think, to make more money.
Thinking long term, 5, 10, 15 years down the road, it's like, do I want these people sticky hands in my business and what we're doing and how we're achieving it, and then have a say in the direction that they want us to take, because they're more about profit than about humanity or the actual underlying principle and vision of the actual founder?
This is the Mooncast.
See you, Space Cowboy.
To me, we've spoken about starting a fund after a couple of years where we've both been quite successful in this space, right? But what I've observed is if you really want something, a phenomenal founder, you have to kind of look for the outliers, right? Because what does it mean for them to have a, Oxford, Cambridge, Ivy League, McKinsey, Bain, BCG background, right? Like, and granted, I'm guilty of this. It came from Big Four, right? But all it meant was, at that time, my thinking process was, I was just jumping through hoops. No matter how smart I was at the time, right, and how successful I was just jumping through hoops. It wasn't until I kind of left corporate for a few years and then came back to it after figuring out like what's important to me, that I think was what was the difference between me being a great consultant and me being a great founder, right? Is literally life experience to mature yourself as an individual, and of course business experience to see failures, right? Like, my co-founder is awesome. He's the absolute, like, to me, the linchpin that makes this work, right? You joke about 20-some-year-old founders. I don't want to reveal David's age, but he does have 30 straight years of technical experience under his belt in a professional space, having built one of the world's first like B2B e-commerce platforms back in the 90s that sold for a little over $1 billion to SAP, right? Like, that's the kind of co-founder I want, especially on the technical side. I don't want someone that is like, yeah, I came out of a great school, I'm really great at scrapping together projects. No, I want scalable, stable, enterprise-ready infrastructure. Because from my side, what I watched for my three odd years at PwC in these companies is, when you start and you take shortcuts to get a product to market faster, yeah, that never gets fixed. Nobody, you always think, oh, I'll go back and tackle that. But what realistically happens is you end up expanding your team and you go, all right, cool. And then people build around the initial, basically initial weak points, and then people build around that, right? So the absolute early foundation, there is no shortcuts. And I feel like sometimes in the tech space, you're encouraged to develop quickly, fail fast. Failing fast, sure, but failing fast has nothing to do with your tech itself, right? I could spin up 1,000,001 ideas right now and do a Figma, a design mockup, and show people what it is and demo it to them, have the idea, get it in front of my actual paying customers, and have it fail fast, right? It does not mean you build something or prototype something quickly from a tech perspective and you then fail fast. To me, tech should be almost the slowest piece of all of this, stable, scalable, because that's why you see all of these startups with 10, 20, 50 people achieving so much. And then, what does Stripe have? Like 10,000 people? The average efficacy per person decreases so much because the foundation is weak. Everybody has to relearn the foundation because it's not a stable foundation. You can't just go, okay, cool, this ground is stable, it does what I expected it to. Like, let me build the next thing on it, right? And so that's why on our side too, we're like quite deliberate about it. For us, Nothing is built just for one reason or one feature, right? Like we think about the future of escrow, atomic settlements, being able to move NFTs around, even though we don't have it right now. We think about streaming payments. We think about one-to-many automated disbursements, like airdrops and things like that. We think about like vesting periods and things like that, and like all these different use cases, so that the core infrastructure that we build is flexible enough to accommodate these in the future, even if it takes it another 2 months versus 1 month to be able to launch something that has a ton of potential future flexibility versus launching something that meets a quick need today. And I think a lot of founders in the space are pressured to like either launch an incredibly grand and vague plan, or kind of service a specific use case or get a prototype to market today, versus that middle ground of like the tech should be slow and deliberate. Because I can sign contracts easy,
dude,
without.
because it's difficult, man. Because when you think about it, okay, would you agree with this statement? We're at the exponential growth phase of technological advancements. Would you agree with that statement?
We're at A1, yes.
Okay, if that is true, then would you argue that if I don't build fast enough, if I don't show speed and vigor, then I lose the opportunity to go to market over somebody else? I don't know. How do you think about that? What is your thought on that?
Luckily, AI is quite nascent in its growth still, right? So I don't think it's as quick. I don't think things develop as quickly as we would fear, right? What I have got, I could not do this without David, right? Like at the end of the day, like if I had another younger, and I'm in my 30s, I had a younger, scrappier person to work with me, we couldn't employ this same strategy. But when he tells me, we're going to build something that's going to have a 2-year technical moat, because we're thinking about, between his and I's shared experience, we're thinking about not the technology itself, but how humans are going to react to this, right? Right now, people are like, oh, crypto payments, can I do it? They haven't even started thinking about shaving off seconds on the checkout so that the customer conversion, the cart rate abandonment starts decreasing, right? They have like if we look at the cycle of technology and technology growth, it always feeds back, because at the end of the day, humans are the end kind of consumers of this technology. So it always comes back to actually user experience and psychology. So no matter how fast you develop a tech, right, if you think you're racing against everyone else, then you're maybe at the wrong spot. Look and understand the market, and look 2 years down the line at what. We don't build on and off ramps. We don't deal with the banking side of things. Granted, if someone requests, as Helicode has the kind of thought about, we'll find a provider that does it. But everybody else is thinking, how do we get from local currency to crypto to local currency? And we're going, well, if crypto is more effective, then at some point, the only reason that people aren't just universally using crypto is because you can't find someone that accepts crypto, so people don't think they can pay in crypto. So this becomes chicken and the egg. Right? Yeah. So look a step ahead. Now that ramps have been more developed, now that centralized exchanges have become developed, and look for the future in 1 to 3 years where almost anybody can easily get their hands on crypto. Then in which case, if by that time there's also infrastructure in place for everybody to easily spend their crypto, then why would anyone go back to their local currency? And so that's how we focus on the strategy, is what is the natural evolution of the technology and how users use it. And then focus not too far in the future, but just right there beyond the current threshold. They will solve on and off ramps. They will solve Web3 customer acquisition, because there's billions of dollars into getting users on ramped. So for me, as understanding my weaknesses and strengths, for me as a relatively new incumbent, or new player in the space, I ought not solve the problems that they should solve. But do I believe that these problems will be solved? Yes, but I will keep my hands off of them and solve the next piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, I love that. Imagine 10xing your earnings capacity to 100K per year while working remotely at the comfort of your own home. We are in the exponential growth phase of technological advancements. That means AI, AR, VR, robotics, and of course, Web3 technologies taking over the job market. At HeliCode Academy, we train students on Web3 hard skills and link them to employment in the job market. Find out more at helicode.xyz. And as always, see you, Space Cowboy. Do you think that fiat is the future for our millennial generation, Zoomers, the alphas that are coming in now? Is fiat the future? And if it's not, is crypto the future, or is just Bitcoin the future for payments? How do you see the landscape of payments changing within the next 10 to 15 to 20 years as we trend towards hyperinflation, even on the more developed or westernized currencies?
20 is a cool one. 20 years is a cool one, right? And it comes down to what we can tokenize, right? So right now, fiat at some point, for the listeners who are not aware, right? Like we moved from having everything be a gold-backed or asset-backed system to essentially now fiat literally means faith-based system. So that if everyone were to try to exchange their US dollars, for example, back into gold or assets, that's no longer a possibility. You can no longer do that. But once upon a time, you could exchange your notes, your paper bills back into gold equivalent. So this is a whole different shift. So I think that the world I don't know what happens in the middle. I really don't, right? Something shatters the faith in or the trust in fiat currency on a large scale, and then I think that's when really crypto is going to take off far more than it even does right now, right? Like global financial instability, which we're kind of starting to see, lack of trust in centralized banks, which we're starting to see. There just needs to be a trigger, and or as we establish, we can be the media group that is the trigger, right? Like there's certain things that I can trigger that lead to the adoption of the things. I just need to make sure I'm in the right places first. But I think what we're tokenizing, what you're getting with Bitcoin, for example, is you have to mine it, which means you have to put in energy. So people are like, oh, it's inefficient. Well, yeah, it's meant to be inefficient. It's supposed to be inefficient, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what if we have commodities as well, right? Like commodities and futures for buying like agriculture or like oil and things like that, right? But what if we just directly tokenize energy? Because that's really the currency. What if we directly tokenize energy, or essentially like human resource hours? Like there's other things that we can tokenize. That money is kind of the means of transmission of value. But what if we just tokenize the end value itself and go, well, shit, here's X amount of units of energy, and then we just trade with that instead of a local fiat currency? There's these interesting things in play that I think are possible 15, 20 years from now that change how we look at currency itself, but rather the actual currency is the value, right? You can unpack, like Amazon Web Service credit, you can literally unpack, like, why don't I just trade you an Amazon Web Service credits, right? That I can literally unpack this exact thing into value rather than, and I'm not a partner of them, so I'm not shilling them, but I can literally unpack this exact thing into direct value for me instead of getting that back into local currency and then back into purchasing the value.
Yeah.
And that's tokenization. Like think about it. Like on a like a Fiverr for example, right? People hire, people get paid, but like once you get into their system, why is it that they don't just have their own stable credit, which I think they do, but it's pegged to the US dollar, of which everything on that platform itself, receiving and paying and then tying it to Amazon or something, for an example, an ability for it to be liquid, right? That is to me what tokenization unlocks.
Yeah. Well, what do you think about the nation states getting in and making Bitcoin specifically a strategic reserve asset? Do you think it's only going to be Bitcoin? Do you think that, for me, I'm when it comes to the most secure peer-to-peer decentralized open source network in the world, I mean, I think there's nothing that's comparable to Bitcoin. I consider Bitcoin the technology, and more altcoins are more leveraging the technology to enhance goods or services or products that they're building. So I think it's two separate things. One of them is more decentralized, while the other one is like, has a point of a counterparty risk, right? The CEO or the founder. But do you think that this strategic reserve asset potential move, specifically by the United States, is going to be the triggering point that makes everything go into mass adoption and everybody's just accepting crypto payments, and we just kind of hit that beginning of the S curve, right? It just goes like bananas. How do you see that potential move? I don't know if you read the 53-page strategic reserve document, but what are
No,
your
I
thoughts on
didn't.
that?
Do you mind giving me like a 30-second to 1 minute kind of cover of that?
Yeah, I'll give you a one-liner. They want to buy in the U.S. 200,000 Bitcoin for the next 5 years.
Okay. So Bitcoin, I got one big question about Bitcoin. Other than that, uh, the majority of the other tokens right now, Bitcoin's one of the few that is widely used ones that is still proof of work. Again, proof of work is kind of necessary game theory wise to prevent someone from accumulating a massive supply of it and then being able to kind of monopolize the other incoming supply, right? Because the algorithm itself adjusts, right? If the US somehow manages to get 75% of the mining power, there's nothing that stops another party, like a China counterparty, for example, from also putting in a massive amount of mining power and evening that back out. It's kind of like it's basically it's an open playing ground and a fair playing ground. Whereas a lot of these other meme coins that have come out, underneath the hood, the supply is actually. I know the companies that are doing the supply, the distribution, the tokenomics, right? I don't want to say anything bad about them, but the supply is literally just being kept on an Excel, basically an Excel spreadsheet, and then at some point sent out. Like it is incredibly centralized. It is very, very. I mean, the closest thing is probably like I don't know, like in-game gold if you ever play Warcraft or like RuneScape or something. At least someone is controlling all of this and just going, yes, we got to send this much to these people at this time, but they are custodying it. It is nowhere near as safe or as secure as they would like for you to believe.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, they're just little currencies on top of the main infrastructure, right? Like any meme coin that's launched on an EVM compatible chain, what they're actually borrowing from is EVM's, Ethereum's infrastructure, their security, their consensus protocols. Anything built on Solana, the SPL tokens are doing the same, right? They're really like these companies aren't doing something from a raw like blockchain infrastructure perspective different. They're usually offering some kind of service and then saying, hey, you can essentially have a cut of this if you had the token, which is why most of them don't amount to much other than just the value of the token. They're basically just like stocks, right? Like that's about it.
Yeah.
that's,
Exactly.
yeah.
Don't let Gary hear you. Don't let Gary Gensler hear you, man. But
I keep seeing people say that he's open for work, and I'm looking I keep seeing the LinkedIn thing that says Gary goes like open for work. But at the end of the day, the world changes, and people got to realize that regulation and legal things they're all arbitrary. That's the reality.
yeah,
It's all human made. So why is it that one human made structure will be superior to another? And I question and I challenge. At the beginning of the conversation, I said, hey, I don't mind taxes. I think they're important. And maybe in some areas they're done well and done poorly. But at the end of the day, so long as something is a human created structure or kind of guardrails, I take those with a grain of salt.
yeah, yeah. I would say exactly the same thing too, as well. Yeah, I mean, rules, constructs. As you probably know from traveling and learning about how the world works, you just then realize, oh, like, well, why does this make sense? Why does this ideology make sense? And you're comparing ideologies, well, and you see how other people live. You see how other people function, how other governments are structured, how other governments were structured before, you know, the West colonized 90% of the world, you know. But before that, you know, there was very unique, different structurings going on. You know, you had just like weird combinations of like monarchies plus, you know, it was a bunch of different things, and some of it was efficient for those specific people, and while other things weren't. And when you look at the totality of how the world is today, it's like, well, who created these systems? Even when you look at the concept of economics, right? You know, when you look at it deeply, the economics is the study of scarcity. You know, what scarcity does the global South have? It's specifically Africa, right? And it's just, then you start to look and dig deep and think, wait, was this like just like a viewpoint from your perspective and your lens that you've like kind of forced and created like a fake interdependency? You know, so yeah, I've looked at a lot of these things deeply, man. So I totally agree with you. I wanted to shift over to stable coins because I know that's the main thing that you guys are going to be facilitating. You're not going to be doing like volatile sort of assets like, let's say like, oh, people can send Solana and you'd be able to then pay for that service on the internet using your merchant pay, your crypto merchant pay. It would be mainly like stable coins, right?
So the ultimate vision is for people to literally pay in pretty much anything, right? Um, and then for the end user to receive pretty much anything, right? That this concept of it shouldn't matter as long as it's a tokenized asset with some form of value, either on a deck, some form of liquidity, either on a deck, centralized exchange, that people should be able to pay with it. You as a business might just want stablecoin. Like, sure, what we're going to do then in that case is you want to pay for it? Well, there's a certain amount of convenience, right? We'll spot swap your token into stablecoins. The merchant can receive stablecoin. But what you got is that thing you just made like 800% off is actually just liquid for you now, right? So this kind of concept of, and I don't think this exists right now. Almost a blend of a forex and a merchant gateway, right? If a shit ton of people are trying to dump this through the system, of course our convenience fee becomes higher based on the volatility of the token and the kind of obscurity, liquidity, or lack thereof of the token. Now, if it's something that's incredibly stable, incredibly liquid, like a USDC, USDT, sure, you know, that would peg at a 1-to-1 US dollars. If it's a new stable coin that has relatively less liquidity, maybe there's a convenience fee, right? And then for us, it just protects ourselves. But for the ecosystems, then, you know, at the end of the day, like, what's going to happen is continued fragmentation of ecosystems. It makes a lot of sense to have your own stablecoin. It makes a lot of sense to have your own token. You get to harvest a lot of that wealth and that potential, right? And that brand. So that's only going to happen more and more. I don't know if you know, but in the U.S., when car manufacturing first started, I think there were like 3,000 car manufacturers, and now we've got what, like a single-digit amount of them in the U.S., right? So this is just what happens with any new technology. But what we want to do is essentially check out the Walmart shelf space for you, right? Where you can see all these other things. And if you're a new token, you can be like, listen, use our token. We'll subsidize you 15, 20% off just to use our token, right?
Yeah.
Because you know that people will do it. They will undercut other people. And because they're harvesting, say, 4 or 5% yield annually, you know, they don't mind, themselves, you know, taking a bit of the cut, or that they've just received $200 million in funding, but user acquisition is a major pain in the ass for them. So they go, guess what? If you use our they reach out to us and say, hey, just tell every single customer they'll get 20% off of any of their purchases, and they subsidize it. Because, I mean, how that would be $50 million of essentially actual payment processing that goes through at a cost of 10 million for them. So their cost of customer acquisition is essentially however much the percentage is, right? So it's something easy for them to wrap their heads around. Of, if you incentivize people enough, they will pay with your token, not just pay with crypto, but they will pay with your token specifically, especially if they're price sensitive.
Picture this. You're an inspiring computer science major. You have the 4-year degree program finished. You get out, start looking for work within the job market, and then you realize that there's no jobs. What you end up doing is you become an Uber driver because you realize that that piece of paper that you were chasing was actually worthless. The reality is, most institutions are behind. HeliCode solves this problem by teaching you on-demand Web3 tech skills in a short duration of time and links you to employment with our job placement services. And the best part is, you can work remotely. Find out more at helicode.xyz, and as always, see you, Space Cowboy.
Sorry, I might have derailed the conversation. What was the initial initial bit?
Yeah, no, I think you got it. You got it. So I'm just trying to figure out how your thought process was with the stable coins in general. Do you see them having a future? And also, what about the CBDC introduction? I actually have an interesting theory. I actually think that USDT is going to become the default CBDC. I think that's how they're going to roll it out. But I don't know how you think. Do you think they're going to recreate a whole new infrastructure? And I don't know if you're paying attention to like the global landscape of like BRICS is coming up with something too as well to compete. Then you have Bitcoin, obviously. Then you obviously have CBDCs potentially rolling out too as well. So how do you look at the landscape of reserve currencies? Will we go into my theory is we're going to go into a multi-reserve currency environment where they're just competing for market share, and then the best man will win, right? The free market will decide. But how do you see it?
So there's stable coins. Some are centralized, some are decentralized, right? Like each of these things, how we see it, it doesn't mean whether or not what their ethos is. It just means the technology is built on. For example, I think JP Morgan still has a private blockchain.
They do.
A lot of these CDBCs might be built on private blockchains so that they can have both, so that they have essentially full control over it, as well as the level of transparency or not. Now, that just means they're leveraging blockchain technology, which is totally fine, right? Like to me, blockchain is the transition to blockchain is kind of like the transition from like ERP hardware systems to cloud, right? That it has value in itself as just a more efficient system where data inputs, outputs are standardized. Period. Now, that's totally separate to me than the ethos of, because the input outputs are standardized and transparent, if you copy them across enough people, also set resistance to censorship, then that means it does not need intermediaries, and there's efficiency that comes from there and capabilities that open. To me, those are two different things. What blockchain does, and then what the applied decentralized ledger technology can do, to me, are starting to split off. You'll find efficiencies just in moving things on chain, but I think you'll find a lot more efficiencies long term, and that's what I'm trying to get and move things towards, is that it's not a threat to current systems. It's a way for everybody to make, every single entity involved, I think, to make more money, right? Like if they're not serving you already, and if actually every single entity involved except for Visa, probably. Sorry, Visa. That's why Visa's 600 billion and Stripe's only 60 billion. I think PayPal's like 80, 90 billion now or something like that, right? That's why there's this magnitude of difference, is because they're underlying so much of it. And then Swift is, I think, a privately held company, so I don't even know how much how much the Swift protocol makes, if they make anything, right? But like fundamentally, Stripe's in like 40 odd countries, maybe 50 odd countries now. So that means there's a lot of areas that they can't reach. Now, if they implemented essentially decentralized crypto payments, their playing field becomes a little bit different, and they can essentially just reach markets they otherwise couldn't. Back to this stablecoin CDBC idea then, is I think no matter what, it's still going to be built on a similar technology, which is blockchain technology, right? So for us, I don't care what form or shape that this takes. We'll be able to move all of it with our tech. So whether we do the enterprise side for a government, and there are some, like 1 or 2 government contracts that we're working on where they want to have their local digital currency, and we are just the ones that power that movement, that power of commerce, power that commerce, because it's still, once you have it, how do people spend it? How does it integrate with the merchants? That's still a major thing after they've figured out their fiscal policy and how they want to, back the treasury of it. So to me, anything on blockchain is a major win for us.
Yeah, dude. Honestly, that's something that, like I said, we're going to talk about more offline. Just because, yeah, I had something just sparked my interest. So that's something, like I said, I really like you guys' use case a lot. And again, that's why, we've created this partnership between us. I'm hoping to have a long, fruitful partnership between us, and it extends out for years to come. And also, do you think, because that's another thing too as well that annoys me, when founders come up with these goofy use cases, and I'm just like, this doesn't need a token. Like for instance, I had built a B2B blockchain SaaS-based model for documentation and storage for logistics, and we didn't release a token because there was no token needed. We just leveraged the Polygon blockchain and linked the documents to a transaction hash, so that it could pose as immutability, right? So you can see it on chain. And you get
So
what
you
I'm saying,
hash the
right?
documents. You hash the documents that allowed people to compare the hashes of the two documents so that they could essentially, basically in a
Correct.
zero knowledge way of the other documents, compare the hashes. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, makes sense to me.
Yeah, for you, but the audience, I try to break it down simply because not everyone can get that technical, which is totally fine. And this is why this podcast exists. But yeah, basically you're just linking the document to the blockchain so that it just shows as it acts as a verifiable proof, right? So it's nothing too complicated, guys, for people that are listening. But yeah, people were like, we had a couple opportunities to raise capital, and I know we've talked about this stuff offline, but I'm just too honest. And they were like, yeah, we're in. So we want, to raise
TGE?
X amount of money. And they were like, where's the TGE? The TGE, So we were like, what TGE? What are you talking about? They were like, yeah, when's the token generated event, blah, 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 so we can, prepare. And I'm like, dude, we're not going to be doing that. This is like a B2B enterprise. We don't even call it, when we were selling it to logistics companies, we were calling it distributed ledger technology.
Yep.
Just so we didn't even want, I don't even want you to even think Web3 crypto. Like, no, blockchain even can be a little bit dirty word. So I said, no, this is just distributed ledger technology. But that's where we're at. It's seen sometimes as like this sketchy criminal sort of. I'm like, no, dude, I'm trying to actually solve your problem. So do you think founders get it wrong, man, with trying to just release a token, or is it just the fact that the token accessibility and ease of fundraising is the reason why people are so keen on tokens, and also the ease of liquidating as a VC is the reason why people prefer token raises?
Listen, VCs are not nonprofits. They're beholden, unless they're evergreen funds, to their LPs, right? So VCs, for everyone who's not aware, venture capitals, they're basically investment companies that take money from other investors, family offices, or individuals who have a lot of wealth, and invest on their behalf. So their value generation is literally the active sourcing of projects and investment in them. Right? So that's how that structure works. So at the end of the day, they have really like two things to maintain: brand and returns. So for me, it makes absolute sense that if I could if my job was to make my investors money, like carte blanche on a fund, right? And I was able to invest in a ton of different companies, I would invest in liquid tokens, right? Because that's a way in 2 to 4 years to get outsized returns. My job as a founder to my investors is to make sure that my single project has longevity beyond 50s or hundreds of millions, but rather into the billions. So for me, a token upfront cannibalizes that potential opportunity to actually launch a token in quite a few years, but also goes in kind of contrast to the equity plan, right? There's a limited amount of time, and a lot of founders' time gets put into the token, the listing, the exchanges. Binance takes 10%. Most of these centralized,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Binance takes 10%. Most of these centralized exchanges charge you about like 50 to 150K to list. That's the kind of dirty underbelly of most of this, right? So you raise $1 million, $2 million. Most of that just goes to community building, tokenomics, the legal compliance to make sure that you have basically a proper offshore account, that it's a separate entity. There's so much fucking dirty play that goes on to me, where really what it is the sole purpose of it is to generate money, and to me that's dirty, right? That it's so far removed from the founder's potential initial vision or what value they want to provide to the world, to businesses, to their customers, and rather just becomes around the token churn flywheel.
Do you think that as a founder, you should just, if possible, you should just skip the whole fundraising? Because sometimes I question, because it's like, do I want these people on my cap table and then to be at the boards and etc. all this kind of stuff? So it's like they then become partners for long periods of time, right? If you're thinking long term, 5, 10, 15 years down the road, it's like, do I want these people sticky hands in my business and what we're doing and how we're achieving it, and then have a say in the direction that they want us to take, because they're more about profit than about humanity or the actual underlying principle and vision of the actual founder? It's just so interesting and convoluted at the same time. But I don't know, how do you see that? How do you think founders should navigate through that? And do you think fundraising is right for everybody?
Well, man, I think it's totally valid to say I want to make money, right? Not me personally, but I mean, financial incentives are an incredible part of mine. But there are people who just go, damn, like I want to make money, right? It's better than my 9 to 5 job, and that's how I want to most efficiently allocate my time. And tokens are a good way to do it. And their strength is charisma, maybe not building. And this is just the way that they make money, right? Like for some people, it checks out. And then also for some people who have a long-term vision, they might go, listen, fuck it. If it's free money on the table and I can get an extra 10, 15, 20 mil in for the company, plus liquidity on the token side, and that'll help me accelerate me towards my vision, and I got to take some money in while I'm on the way there, like that's also an incredibly viable thing, right? So it depends on everyone's play strategy and how they want to go through life. For me, it just happened to be that when I entertained the token idea, the very idea of spending my time doing something that is not generating value is not value generating to my end customer, and I have to give up equity and I have to deal with all this like political bullshit that doesn't really, to me, enhance my skills for the future. It just didn't mesh with me, right? I would just rather go be an executive at a different company, rake in like $500,000 a year, and then use that to self-fund if I'm just really caring about the money then.
Yeah, man, dude, you make absolute sense, man, and it's one of those tough things that like I said, I struggle with, and because I have so much integrity. I'm just like, and getting into this and being relatively early. This is the third project that I've launched with Helicode, and yeah, I just look at it from a perspective of, look, I know you want to make money. That's why you want to potentially deploy capital to me, but I don't want to sit there and lie to you and say X, Y, and Z, and then I end up not fulfilling that, and then my reputation gets damaged in the long term, and then people will know me as the Do Kwon of this industry.
Yeah, I've also heard of a lot of people, like a lot of founders just, they don't actually have the plan to launch the token. Like they say they're doing Q3, but they don't actually have the means to do it or the plans to do it, and they just say it anyways to get the capital. And then it just means that people are used to TGEs being delayed. It all just plays around the meta, and I'm like, oh my god, but what about the principles of this, right? So to me, these are short-term fluctuations in how the market works, and to stay long-term to the vision makes the absolute most sense. Like, right, like you've got a big picture play, where I understand it, and it basically revolves around both providing value to essentially all of providing value and work opportunity, technical skill opportunity, training opportunity to a typically demanded market that is incredibly hardworking with a young population of upcoming professionals to essentially the rest of the world, right? So to me, that's a long-term vision that having a token now would just derail you. Now having a token in 3-4 years where you go, hey, listen, like, if you as a company own a token, or if you as an individual participate within our space, the longer you are part of our platform of employment, our community of this kind of African talent to companies that want it, the longer you are, the more tokens you get, the more perks you get, right? Of, hey, you've now hired, for every single $100,000 that you've hired, you get 10,000 of our tokens. You can either take those 10,000 of our tokens and get exposure to some of the commission that we get on essentially recruitment and placing, or you yourself can get access to our top 5% of graduates 2-3 weeks before they hit the market for everyone else, right? There's a lot of shit that you can do there where the token makes sense after you've established this economy, which we can talk about a ton later. Everyone has a good case for a token, but it really just comes down to essentially loyalty and incentives. But the cool thing about these is they're so easily convertible to liquidity, and able to partner or essentially collaborate with other projects. That tokens have a strong value if you've already got your business set up properly.
Yeah, I agree, man. Jasper, man, I want to freaking continue this, man, because we're going on so long. But I gotta jump to a Twitter space here shortly. So, where can people find Coinsub on the internet, and where can they partner with you if they want to integrate their solution? Where are the places to find you, find Coinsub?
Easiest way is to just go to coinsub.io or look for me, Jasper Fu. I'm kind of a serious looking Asian dude with glasses. I'm really not that serious, I promise, as you guys have heard. But easiest way is just to reach out to me. I'm friendly. If I don't respond the first time, I get inundated, just message me again. But I am totally open to collaborations, talking to people, regardless of where, if you're just starting and getting into the space, or if like you're an investor or a potential partner, just reach out to me and just say, hey.
Awesome. I'm gonna leave the links in the show notes that you'll send to me later, man. I want to thank you so much for coming on. This has been really good. I literally could talk to you for like 3, 4, 5 hours. You're just one of those people that's just easy to talk to. And I really enjoy our conversations every time we have them, man. So much appreciated, and glad to have you as part of our network and our team and our vision too as well. And appreciate you so much, man, as a great human being, man. So thank you for coming on.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. We can do a series of these in the future if people actually do like it, and we can just do AMAs as well. Happy to just chat and give a little bit of transparency to what's going on underneath the hood, or just my thoughts if people like them. So likewise, I really enjoy speaking with you, and I do hope the community enjoys it.
Yeah, thank you, Jasper. Yeah, definitely, man. So this concludes this episode of the Mooncast, man, and peace. Take care, brother. Have a good one.
Peace.